Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're looking at something deeply personal today, something fundamentally life-changing. We are exploring the harsh realities of toxic relationships, and more importantly, how we actually break the cycle. Today's narrative comes from a profoundly raw, honest account by Catherine, the founder of Finally Home magazine. Through her survival story, we get this unfiltered look at the psychological traps of abuse, and we're going to break it all down, step by step, using really simple, relatable language. My father literally killed me. Do you want to know something even more shocking? I didn't realize he was abusive at the time. Catherine is talking about a deeply traumatic event here, where her father forced her to overdose when she was just 13 years old. But that second half of the quote, that is what we really need to focus on today. It reveals this incredibly shocking truth that so many people outside of these situations just do not understand. When you are trapped in the cycle of abuse, you often don't even recognize it as abuse. Your entire reality just becomes completely distorted. And that distortion happens because of one core belief. If only I didn't do this, then he wouldn't have done that. This is the internal rationalization that absolutely traps people. Catherine explains that her father told her she was useless, that she just wasn't enough. And, she believed him. She was convinced the abuse was entirely her own fault. She thought if I was just smarter or prettier or if I just didn't make him mad, these terrible things wouldn't happen. It's this classic mechanism of self-blame, where the victim completely takes responsibility for the abuser's actions. Section 1. The cycle of abuse. Why we blame ourselves. People are always asking, well, why don't you just leave? Well, as Catherine's story reveals, it's literally never that simple. And this brilliantly illustrates the foundation of the trap, which really comes down to a few raw reasons. First, like we just talked about, thinking it's your fault. When someone constantly tells you everything is your fault, you just stop questioning it altogether. Second, the reward high. Third, believing you just can't do any better because you've been made to feel utterly worthless. As Catherine so bluntly puts it, toxic people make you feel like a useless piece of shit. And when you genuinely believe that about yourself, you aren't looking for an exit door because you don't believe anything better is out there anyway. And finally, just completely low confidence. Actually, let me pause on that reward high for a second. This is absolutely crucial to understand. The cycle mimics a literal addiction. You're put through these extreme lows, right? So that when the abuser finally gives you this tiny microscopic hint of approval or just gets something right, you experience this massive high. You start craving that tiny reward. You endure all the manipulation and the disappointment just to chase that fleeting feeling of validation. It is a deliberate trap designed to keep you hooked. And that trap relies heavily on the victim's self-worth. Catherine shared the story about an ex-partner that hits the nail right on the head. She noted that he specifically preyed on her low confidence because it made her way easier to manipulate. He showered her with attention when she was feeling bullied and insecure, making him look like this big savior. But the moment she started a business, gained some self-worth, and built up her confidence, he left. Toxic people do not want you to be strong. They literally need you to be vulnerable so they can keep their control. There's also another layer to this vulnerability that Catherine highlights from her own life. Neurodivergent individuals, especially those who are autistic, can sometimes become perfect targets for abusers. Think about it. When you grow up feeling weird or getting bullied for being different, you might crave any type of positive attention. More importantly, Catherine explains that because she found society's unspoken rules really hard to grasp, she just learned to adapt perfectly to whatever rules were handed to her so she could fit in. So an abuser hands you a set of twisted, toxic rules, and you just follow them, thinking, okay, this is just how I'm supposed to interact with the world. Section 2. The Epiphany. How to break the cycle. So when your reality is being constantly distorted, your emotions are being played with like a toy, and you're told everything is your fault, how do you escape the manipulation? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it points to the exact anchor you need to ground yourself. You anchor yourself with facts. Just taking a mental note of actual events. A fact is something that definitively happened. It can't be manipulated, it can't be gaslit, and it can't be lied about. When your abuser is in your face telling you you're overreacting or that you caused the whole problem, you cut straight through that noise by relying entirely on the tangible, recorded events in your mind. Catherine laid it out so perfectly. Fact, my dad gave me a pill. Fact, my dad hit me. Fact, I never hit him. By just stripping away the emotions, removing the guilt, and ignoring all the manipulative dialogue, she was left with just the raw, indisputable facts. And looking at those facts, she finally realized the absolute truth. It wasn't her fault. She hadn't done a single thing to deserve it. So, the crucial point is an abusive or toxic person really can't outrun the facts. Sure, they can twist your feelings, they can twist your words, and they will absolutely play on your insecurities, but they cannot change the physical reality of what actually occurred. Facts are your absolute best shield against gaslighting. And once you see those facts clearly, you hit this amazing breaking point, a true point of empowerment. The door to your freedom opens the moment you decide your peace is worth more than their control. This is that huge realization that you no longer have to adapt to someone else's toxic, heavy rules. You are absolutely allowed to prioritize your own peace. Section 3, the new paradigm. What healthy actually means. Let's move to and see how this builds into something completely different. Breaking free is really just the first step. The genuine shock comes when you finally discover what a healthy space actually looks like. In a toxic environment, the rules are basically to walk on eggshells, keep quiet, and behave like a good girl who never, ever disagrees. Catherine literally describes feeling like she needed permission just to ask for a glass of water. It's totally suffocating. But a healthy reality? You're actually allowed to speak your mind. Conflict is safe. When that person walks into a room, you don't feel this heavy, anxious dread in your chest. You feel a sigh of relief. Now, these concepts might seem pretty basic to some people, but to someone escaping abuse, they are literally revolutionary. You are allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to just break down and cry knowing someone will actually pick you up. Bringing it back to the context of autism for a second, Catherine notes how incredible it was to realize she was allowed to be blunt. She was allowed to share different opinions without having to constantly silence herself just to follow someone else's oppressive rules. And this is perhaps the most beautiful reframing of the whole shebang. In a healthy relationship, conflict just isn't dangerous. Disagreeing doesn't mean you're going to be punished or abused. It's like a giant puzzle. It's just two different pieces, two partners, safely working together to figure out a solution. It is entirely free of anxiety. Which leads us to a pretty big question, one you really need to honestly ask yourself. How can you feel safe if your relationships make you anxious? If there's this constant, weird heaviness whenever you're around your partner or your family, that's a massive red flag. It's a sign of an unhealthy dynamic. Your home and the people in it should be your absolute sanctuary, not the source of your panic. As we start bringing this explainer to a close, I want to leave you with this really profound quote that Catherine featured. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. It's the ultimate reminder for anyone out there seeking to break the cycle. The abuse, the toxicity, the manipulation, yes, that is what happened to you, but it does not define your future. You have the power, using the facts and trusting your own worth, to choose exactly what you become next. So my final question to you is this. What small step are you going to take today to find a place where you finally feel like you're enough? I really encourage you to take this information, step out of the shadows of anyone else's toxic rules, and start showing up in the world as your truest, weirdest, most authentic self. Build a life where you feel loved and where you are finally home. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this vital topic today. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next explainer.